Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next podcast. So today I'm joined by Julian Chapman. So Julian got in touch with me, actually. He'd been watching some of our podcasts, which was very good for me to know that people are watching them in the first instance and enjoying them. So firstly, welcome, Julian. Thank you for joining.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
So Julian's also from Manchester as well. So even though it's the same format as every week, it's good to have someone who's a little bit closer to home this time. So Julian's kicking off. Why did you get into physio?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story, to be honest. I wanted to be a vet to begin with. So we're doing our work experience, sorted it all out at school, and went to the veterinary surgery. And then after the second or third day, the vet was like, "You're not really interested in this much, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, it's interesting, but I was more interested into the post-op rehab." So we had a couple of dogs in, I think it was an Alsatian and a Doberman, and they tend to do the cruciate ligaments because they're heavy dogs, and when they jump up on the hind feet, they tend to either snap them or strain them. So we did a couple of surgeries, and I was asking more questions about what happens now when they come around off the anaesthetic. What do we do? How are they rehabbed? How do you manage them? And she kind of said, "You're more interested in rehab than actually being a vet." So she suggested being a veterinary physiotherapist, and I stuck with the humans in the end. So yeah, that's how it all happened.
So what age were you then when you were going to do that?
It would have been about 16, 17-ish it would have been. So yeah, my gran was a nurse, so she was in healthcare, and I saw how much she enjoyed it. And I've always been into animals. We had like fish and tortoises as kids. So I always had the interest in animals. So that's where the veterinary aspect of things came from. But yeah, the vet pretty much guided my direction into the rehab side of things. So a bit random, but at the same time meant to be.
Yeah, no, it is really. I mean, there's something certainly with we've been working with diagnostic ultrasound and shockwave, and I've been amazed at how much money is spent in that. I've never really had any pets, but seeing that the money and the teams and the development in terms of that veterinary side is incredible. So I suppose they are, certainly on like the horses, for example, they are like professional athletes, aren't they? They're like really expensive.
Yeah, they keep a good look at them. And again, we had fish as kids. I remember the fish was older than I was. I think it was 10 at the time, and it grew an ulcer on its side, and it started to list to the left-hand side in the tank. Now, it was part of the family, so my mum took the fish to the vet to see if they could do anything with this ulcer. And obviously she came back home empty-handed and said no. The vet said that's pretty much it for Nimrod. So yeah, there's a lot of work behind veterinary and animal care.
Yeah, I've never thought of rehabbing a fish, but that's it, isn't it? It is part of the family. So So once you'd made that decision, then was that something that prompted you to look at like what A levels you're doing or BTECs or whatever it is?
Yeah. So at the time would have been our GCSEs. So I came about it in a funny way, to be honest, because you want more sciences to go into, obviously, to do the physiotherapy course. But for A level, I did geography, English, Lang and Lit, and biology. And that was just the way that I wanted to do geology, but they couldn't fit it into the prospectus for sixth form. So I wasn't 100% sure they were the right kind of subjects to get in. But Manchester and Salford and Kiel, said, yeah, that they'd be all right. So biology was key, obviously. And then the soil geography is a bit of a science as well. It's a toss-up between geography and physics, to be honest, but I enjoy geography more. And then the English, Lang and Lit, they accepted all three.
But when you were picking those, did you have an idea that you did want to go into physio at that point?
To a degree, that was the one thing I could think of at the time. Again, my gran at the time said, "Well, is that where the big bucks are?" She said, "Is that where the money is?" And I was like, "Well, no." But that was my focus at that point in time. I wanted to help people. I'm a bit of a people's person, and if it wasn't going to be animals, it'd be humans, and that's where my focus was at the time.
So what was the next step then after you'd done those A levels?
So it was obviously getting the A levels completed. When it actually came down to getting in, my first offer was at Manchester, but I think because of the subjects, they said they wanted to put me through clearing to go into the next year. So they said, you've done well enough, but because of such a demand, I think it was the biggest intake in Europe at that time. and it was the Manchester School of Physiotherapy, so it was specifically just for physio. So they basically said, well, you've done well enough, but leave it till next year because the intake is so high this year, and there's different subjects that people have chosen that are more geared to this specifically. So in our family, we're people of faith, and mum was like, no, we're going to go for it this year, we're going to pray about it, and she kind of frog marched me down to the School of Physiotherapy to speak to the dean, and said, well, he's really keen, he's really interested, I don't want him to have a gap year. So if you can do anything, then please. And said, well, if anyone drops off the course, we'll put you as the first refusal. And then thankfully, somebody did. So yeah, that was it. I was in my first year then.
Why do you think that your mum wanted you to go straight in? Like, what I actually, in retrospect now, I think like a gap year can be so crucial for people.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, because it was literally straight from GCSE to A levels at sixth form, and then straight into uni. So again, as a young person, you're kind of thinking, right, let me have a bit of a break. I never went on any holidays all that time either, from my GCSEs all the way through uni. To be honest, I literally just grafted. So between your A levels, and uni, in my head, I was thinking, well, maybe have a bit of a break, experience a bit of life. And she was like, no. So once you get your degree, that's it. You can do whatever you want to after that. But if you stop, you might not want to go back, or you might become more lackadaisical. So she said, no, just stick with it. And that was it. That was the decision made, basically.
It wasn't your decision, it was your mum's.
Well, yeah, no, it's pretty much hers, but I went along with it because she's done good by me so far. So
yeah, no, I can definitely empathise with that. So I would agree with that. Yeah. So then someone dropped out, you managed to go, and then, so were you staying on campus or were you living at home?
No, so again, being from Manchester, it was kind of like, well, what's the point in spending money on a campus, which is about, I lived in Urmston at the time, so it was about 7 miles from home to uni. So I said, I'll stay at home, work through uni as well, and then try not to recruit any debt. So I think that tainted the experience to a degree, because again, at sixth form, people used to come in and say, uni's the best years of your life, you got all this time to yourself, you make loads of new friends and this and that. So I was kind of really geared to, this is going to be my new beginning. So staying at home, I think it did change that experience a little bit, because it's kind of like nothing really changed apart from the fact that you don't get as much help as you used to get from your teachers at school, and maybe a new set of friends, but you're still kind of studying, working from home, and then doing the whole uni thing as well. So yeah, I stayed at home for the 3 years.
And what was the breakdown then in terms of the people that were attending the course, male to female, black, white, etc.? Yeah,
so I think it's about 70% female, to be honest, and then obviously 30% male. At my school was William Humes Grammar School, so it was in the centre of Manchester basically, and you had like a really good mix, like a good socio-economic mix, lots of different races, lots of different religions, and it's like a massive melting pot. So it was a really good experience in regards to growing up, because it shows you a cross section of society. So I'd been there for 5-6 years, so really got used to that. Then hitting university and the School of Physiotherapy was a completely different kettle of fish. There's literally, I was the only black guy in the year. There was another black guy in the year above, but he's from Africa. So in regards to being black, it's a skin color. I'm a black man, but cultures change and are different throughout the world. Cultures are different even within the UK. So as a black man from inner city Manchester, coming onto the course, literally there was no one there like me that I could truly relate to. And the closest person I could relate to was an Asian female from Rochdale, my friend who became a close friend, Rabia, and then her friend Feniza as well. So they had brothers who were similar age as I was, so we kind of related a little bit more. So they became quite close friends on the course. But as for any other kind of black influences on there was a lecturer, Mr. Ababao. So he supported a little bit. But as for peers, it's kind of like you're on your own.
And so how was that then? Did you feel any sort of change in the way that people dealt with you because of that?
I wouldn't say a change in the way they dealt with me. I just say perceptions, honestly, because it's very, physiotherapy at the time, maybe even so now, was very white middle class, and with lots of females. So to be there as an inner city kind of black boy, it's kind of like, well, gosh, where do I fit in? So there was a couple of experiences. One of the ones that comes to mind was at the School of Physiotherapy, you've got the main auditorium where you have your presentations, and it's quite a big space. So you can cut through the auditorium to get to the reception area at the front. So one day I'd cut through and I saw some students in the corner. So I saw them, but thought, well, it's just a congregation of students. They weren't really doing much, and I went through. So the next day, one of the girls, it was the year below, and one of the girls said, oh, you cut through our class yesterday. So I was like, did I? I was like, whereabouts? So she said, in the auditorium. So I was like, you had a class in there? It's normally for presentations. So she said, no, we were doing like a bit of an OSCE and a bit of a get together. And she said, the tutor said to the team, he's arrogant, he's an arrogant one. So I was like, about me? And she said, yeah. I was like, I've not really had any interventions with her. She's not taught me. It was my second year, and I hadn't really spent much time around this tutor. So I said I was a bit surprised for that comment to be thought about me, but then to be said to the class at the same time. So I was like, well, I wonder where that's come from. So I went back to the tutor and said, well, I've been told that I walked through your class yesterday, so I just want to apologise because I never realised it was a class because it was in the auditorium. So just please accept my apologies, which she did. But that kind of made me think, well, why has that been said about me when I'm really trying not to come across that way? So yeah, so that was a bit of an experience.
Yeah, but you didn't get any particular answers to why, or did you ask that question?
I didn't ask. I just apologised. Because if it was a misunderstanding, it could just literally be that she just thought this chap's just walked straight through my class. But it just made me think, well, I've not really had that interaction with you to kind of get that vibe, to get the vibe off me, unless I do come across that way, which I really try not to. So it did hit me a bit. I thought, well, that's not a very nice attribute to be labelled at you. So, and again, being in the environment at school, I said it's a big good cultural melting pot. So the teachers at school, they were very supportive, whereas at uni, it's literally, here's a case study, go away and study it and then present on it, or we'll discuss it in class, because there were very big classes then as well. Like, it was the biggest intake in Europe at the time. So that was a big change in how I normally study. So kind of being out of your comfort zone in regards to what you're used to, as well as studying, it was a bit of a challenge in the initial stages.
When you went in there, you've talked about your interest in terms of animals and so on, but did you have any career path in mind?
Not at all. Just literally and my mum always said, and my dad as well always said, get your degree, because once you've got your degree, nobody can take it away from you. You've achieved, and it shows that you've studied to that level. So when I was 14 or 15, it was all about football. And from a young age, mum was like, well, get your GCSEs done, and then you can do what you want. So I did the GCSEs and thought, right, I'm free now. I can do whatever I want. And then it was, well, you've done your GCSEs, so now it's time for your A-levels. So I was like, well, I did my GCSEs. I thought that was it. She's like, no, A-level time now. So then did the A-levels, and then the whole uni thing kicked in as well. So I think the majority of my career, my education, was just trying to become free to do whatever I wanted to do. So in regards to path, I knew I was into musculoskeletal conditions and sports rehab and things like that, but no specific view of I'm going to become this. It was kind of like, just get the degree completed and see how we go from there. And
from your friends and your colleagues and co-pupils on there, did you get the impression that they did know what they wanted to do? Did they have a definitive career path they wanted to do, or area?
Some were ex-footballers. I had a friend that was from Japan, and he had to do a degree in Britain to be able to get into the police force. So literally he was kind of here studying as a physiotherapist, because it shows that you can train at a higher level to get into the police force over there, which is kind of a really high ranking job. So he knew he wanted to get into the police. So there was that. And then the rest of us at that time, the main key thing was do your rotations as always. Get your rotations done, get a good grounding, and then see how you progress from there. I knew I wanted to go into MSK and sports. And I know you had Dave on one of these previously. So I got the opportunity to shadow him at Blackburn Rovers. I was one of the lucky students to be able to shadow him there, and Paul Kelly as well. And then his advice again was the same thing. He says, no, he said, if you just go into sports or just into MSK, it's very focused in that region, but you can lose some of the wider learning. So again, at the same time, he said, no, do your rotations, do the NHS work at first, and then see where you want to specialise after that. So the main concept was do your rotations.
Yeah. And so when you were in there then, how did you manage to get that placement? I can imagine that football teams are in great demand.
Yeah, at Blackburn Rovers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, again, my life's very random, but it's like things happen at certain times for certain reasons. So I was in the School of Physiotherapy. There was like a downstairs reception area and like a chill out zone basically. So I'd finished doing some studying in the library and it was quite late in the afternoon going into the evening. So Dr. Julie Wright, she was on our course at the time as one of the lecturers. And she said, have you applied for the Blackburn Rovers, what do we call it? Basically, you can spend some time with Blackburn Rovers pretty much. So it was Blackburn Rovers and it was Manchester United for the placement. So that's the word, for the placement. So I said, oh, no, there's going to be a lot of competition for it. And she said, well, you should apply. She said, so what some of the criteria was you had to have attended all your classes, which I had done. And you had to have done quite well in your exams, I believe it was at the time, and I'd done all right. And she said, you should apply. So I'd like, oh, we'll see. I know there's a lot of competition, and there's only there's 4 places. She said, you should apply. I said, okay, then so I applied. And then, yeah, I got it. Because you had to be able to drive as well, and because I was living from home, I had my car and everything as well, so I could travel to Blackburn. So, yeah.
What was that like then? So you've gone from being a student, you're in that environment, to all of a sudden you're in with top football team.
Yeah, so at the time it was he was there. I think Andy Cole was there. Dwight York was there when they were both playing together, firing on all cylinders. So it was and Graham Souness was the manager there at the time as well. So it was kind of like, oh, I'm a student, and now all of a sudden I'm with Dave Fevre and Paul Kelly, and with all these superstars. Amaruso was playing there as well. I had a car strain at the time. So it was surreal. It was really surreal. Paul lived in Irpston as well, Flixon I think it was at the time. And so he said he'd pick me up and drive me to Blackburn every morning as well. So it was just really surreal. Great experience. Still got the photos now. And still remember the education that I got from both Paul and Dave as well.
How long was that placement?
I think it's about 4 weeks. I think it's 4 weeks that one was. And again, speaking to Dave, he said at the time, doing the job that he does, he said it's very intense. Because you think about it was all glamorous and you're a football physio or the first team physio. And he says, no, it takes its toll. So think about it, you rehab the players throughout the week for maybe a midweek match. And then if anyone gets injured on that Wednesday night match, you're back in first thing on the morning, Thursday, to assess them and then go through whatever needs to be done. He said the rest of the team will then get the day off if they played well enough, and they come back in on the Friday, ready for the match on the Saturday or the Sunday. Because as a physio, or as a lead physio, you're there the whole time. So if there's an injury, you're back in the next morning. So he said it can take its toll. So again, really good advice. He said to think about it carefully before going down that specific route. You have to be really dedicated to do it. And then that's when he said, with the back team staff as well, he said if the manager changes, the whole of the back team staff can change as well. So you could find yourself out of a position or a role. So it's quite precarious as well. So that was really good advice. And that's when he said, make sure you get your rotations done so that if that does happen, you've got something to fall back on.
So where else did you go on your placements?
So we had some, the first one was at an adult learning disability centre in Rochdale, just off Kingsway. That again was a massive shock to the system. Hadn't come across anyone with a disability like that before. There was no real warning. It was literally, we started in September and the placement started in December. And it's like, right, you're in now. I think it was a 6-weeker, the first one. So I remember working with a girl called Mariah Kerry, great name. And she's a really, really lovely girl, and we supported each other really well during that. So that was the first one. Then we had some at Bury, at Fairfield General, and at the MRI as well.
So yeah, so and then when did you realise then? So you talked about you wanted to do MSK. Did you have any visions of trying to get more permanently into football or any of the other places? Was there any sort of goal then?
Yeah, well, I did a little bit at Ashton United as well, so I was the physio for them for a little bit. But again, still just doing the rotations really, just making sure I had the grounding of what I needed basically to be a decent physio. So we at the Royal Oldham Hospital I worked at. So they used to do the 3 monthly rotations, do kind of neuro, respiratory, all the basics, and then the MSK one for 3 months as well. So there was a lot of band fives and a few band sixes. And back then it was the agenda for change where all the bandings changed. So we had like band sevens kind of being stuck in position, so the band sixes couldn't move upwards. So we ended up rotating for a number of years, kind of over and over again. And then they wanted to change the rotation length from 3 months to 6 months. And at that point, I was kind of thinking, I'd been in the role, I think it's about 3 years at that time as a band, or 2 years as a band five. And at that time I was thinking, well, do you want to spend 6 months in an area that you're not really that interested in? And at that point I thought, well, maybe it's time to kind of make a move and look for something else.
Mm. And where was that on to?
Well, that was with Northwest Cats, where I'm at the moment. So that's, in God willing, in December, that'll be 12 years doing that role. So that started off as the initial physiotherapist on mobile units. So basically what it was a CAT service where the referrals came straight from primary care, but it was consultant led as well. So it made that link between primary and secondary care. So it was setting up those services in the initial stages, kind of as a band six, which was unheard of. It was just crazy to begin with. And the units as well were completely mobile. So they'd go around Greater Manchester to 7 different sites, and kind of being aware of the different cultures, again, changing cultures, changing socio-economic areas, and a change in the type of patients you see as well. So in that regard, it was kind of a unique experience into helping to set that up, and then seeing how different patients change depending on where you are in Greater Manchester. Different expectations, different understandings of the pathologies, different demands. So that's been a really unique experience.
Can you tell me a bit more about that then? So how can you break it down? It's hard to generalize, but what are those differences that you've seen?
So if you're in an area like Trafford, you'd have patients coming from areas like Sale or Lynn, and they would come to you with all the evidence, the newest evidence base. So let's say, I've read the Daily Mail and they've said we need this, and you'd be like, what? Where's this come from? So you kind of have to be on your A game with your evidence base and have a really in-depth conversation in regards to the best treatment plan for that patient. Whereas in other areas of Manchester, they just want either medication or sending for surgery, or the GP has said they need a new knee, so I want a new knee now, and you're stopping me from having this new knee. So it's just the different levels of understanding of the condition, as well as expectations. That's a massive generalization, I know, but you tend to get the general themes from different areas. So we work with consultants as well on the unit. So it wasn't just MSK. We had gynae, podiatry, general medicine, ENT. So you had all these different consultants working on this mobile unit on different days. So you got a general teaching session and understanding of all the different departments, so from the specialists in their field, and you had the support of consultants then as well, with more demanding patients. So it's been a good learning curve being in that environment, and it's kind of been like a kind of precursor to what's happening now with the whole FCP role, because we've always worked with primary care, always worked with GPs. And they refer the patients directly into us for the next step in the CAT service to maybe secondary care. So now what we're looking at doing, even within our organisation, is providing that FCP role, as you know, actually in the GP practice. But it's kind of a natural progression, so to speak, because we've been doing it for the last 11, 12 years.
Yeah, no, is that something that you think makes a big difference then, in terms of offering that within the GP surgeries?
Massively. So they went through a round of redundancies about 4 years ago now. And at the time I suggested, why do we not just use some of the physios that are already doing this role within our service and offer them just to the GP practice, because they're happy with the work that we were doing. The physios are used to that type of referral. They know the criteria for onward referral to surgery. and that can be like nipped straight in the bud as soon as a patient walks in through the GP practice door, and kind of like set the expectations correct from the off. So I think with the new FCP roles, if done correctly and if given enough time, I think it can have a really good outcome and benefit for the patients and for the GPs as well. So I think it's going in the right direction. I just want to make sure it's done correctly, put it that way.
Yeah, no, definitely seems to make sense. I also saw that you were in the CSP recently, so I saw an article of you in the Frontline magazine. How did that come about?
Oh yeah, so with the CSP Leadership Development course. So that, again, another random type of event in my life. In 2017, I think it was, I kept on getting reminders on my Yahoo about, don't forget about the CSP Leadership Development course. And I was like, well, I'm busy. I think I've had my third child. I've got 4 children. I had my 3rd child at that point. I was like, I'm tired. That's not going to happen. The course was about 8 months. It was coming up to Christmas. I've got 2 of my sons are born in December. One on Christmas Day, the other one on the 15th of December. So like, I'm tired. It's not the right time for this. But it must have flashed up 2 or 3 consecutive times. I was like, well, there's a message in this somewhere because I keep on being reminded to apply. So I just thought, let's give it a go. Did my application form, and then got the reply saying, yeah, you're on the course for starting in January. So that was a bit of a random one. A lot of work involved, but a lot of practical work. And it was just basically showing us how to become better leaders and how to improve the leadership of wherever you are. So it's not necessarily leadership just in work, it's in whatever environment that you're in, and to make an effective change. So personally, I'm always thinking of different ideas on how to improve things, but that can end up with you just moaning and grumbling and nothing actually really happens, and not having the power or the tools to be able to implement effective change. So on the course, obviously you always have a personal understanding of where you are in life, and everyone has their own different challenges. So you always think your challenge is more than anybody else's, but on that course, you met up with people that the challenges are much greater than things that I've been through. People that have gone through health scare, people that have been bullied and harassed in work, people that felt really not listened to in work. And on the course, there were lots of tears, lots of people being open and honest. And it was a really, really good experience because it let everyone share their stories and then learn the tools how to improve leadership in where they work and in their lives in general. So it was very, very empowering.
So was that wasn't specific to physio then? That was a general course.
So it was funded by the CSP. So Amy Travis, I think it was, helped to set it all up. So it was for improvement in leadership within physiotherapy, and for physiotherapists or AHPs. But Heather Wicks was the leader on our section of the course. And she said something really profound in regard to the question you asked about physiotherapy. Towards the end of the course, she said, you're a physiotherapist, and I am a physio. Going through uni, it was always very blinkered. Again, I think that's been instilled by my mum and my dad, literally just focus on what you need to focus on and then get what you need to get. But she said, no, you're a physio. You would have always been a physio. You've got your physio degree. You've got your speciality within physiotherapy. But then she said, it doesn't stop there. And I was like, what? It's like, you don't have to just be a physio. So you can apply for any role you want with the prerequisite skills that you've learned within physiotherapy. And for me, that was like, it literally like as a massive eye-opener, because it's always been, no, you're a physio, you stick at physio, you do physio. And it massively expanded my thought processes on what you can do and what you want to be. And she also mentioned about the imposter syndrome, where if you go for different jobs or you look to go into different professions, you kind of think to yourself, well, I'm a physio, that's not for me. And she's like, no, you kind of get that out of your mind and use the skills that you've learned to be whoever you want to be or do whatever you want to do. So that was massively enlightening for me.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I mean, that's something which I've picked up a lot, speaking with Dave, with Nick Worth, and a lot of the other physios in that sporting environment, is that they say the physio element is 5 or 10% of it. It's the actual being able to interact, being able to manage players, management, coaches, all of that. So I think it's definitely, there's so many transferable skills in everything that we're doing. So no, that's interesting. So how long was that course then?
So that went from January to I think it was October. So about 10 months, that course. So it was quite intense because we had to go to London to the CSP headquarters 2 or 3 times. And again, I'm a northern lad. I'm literally based in Manchester, and just thinking actually getting to London, I was like, I'm just literally in Manchester based. So that in itself was like, gosh, you're going down south to the capital. So that was an interesting thing as well. So it was 10 months, and you use some of the skills whilst in your current workplace. We had to do a presentation at the end as well. Made loads of friends, and had lots of good experiences on it. And we still taught now. So there's an ALS, like an active learning set, where we basically use techniques to empower one another to come up with our own answers to questions that we might have. So you kind of dig deeper and deeper into the resolutions, finding your own resolutions to your problems. And that's something that I've used during interviewing for patients now as well, but in a more condensed fashion.
Yeah.
So yeah, it teaches you lots of good skills. So I'd recommend it. And Amy as well, she asked me to kind of do that article for the CSP to invite more BAME members onto that course, because I think at the time it was just myself and an Asian girl that was on it. And there was a drive for more kind of ethnic minorities in these leadership positions, or to make effective change. I said leadership, it doesn't have to be that you're a manager or anything. It just means that you're able to have the skills to make effective changes where you are, wherever that may be.
So you mentioned BAME there then. So what's your thing? We've seen a massive movement with Black Lives Matters this year. Like, what's your interpretation of that being in terms of the global sense? But again, going back to your work, what experiences you've had of that, if any, when you've been working as a physio?
Yeah. So I've got a bit of an issue with the whole Black Lives Matter slogan. I understand what it means, and I understand the thought processes behind it. But for me, it should be changed to Black Living Matters. So everybody, and as some people say, every life matters, and that's very true. Every life does matter. Ultimately, we're all the same. We've got different hues, different cultures, but as for the human race, we're all part of the same human race. Understanding people's differences are key. I believe understanding people's thought processes is also key, and having that communication and understanding with one another is the main thing. I think once we can communicate that we are different in our thought process and thought patterns, and that some things are more offensive to others than not, once there's that understanding, I think then we can have an active change. And it all depends on if we've got the stomach and the appetite for that change. We can do all the white papers we want. We can use all the statistics that we need. But if there's no actual appetite to effectively change things, then you can't force people to change. You can encourage and tell your story. So for me, the Black Lives Matter. Every life matters, and I know that offends some people, but every life does matter. For me, it's the living. So it's the Black living that matters, to ensure that people have the same living conditions, the same living opportunities, and it's the living that's key. Because you can have a life, but it doesn't mean you've got a good life. It doesn't mean you've got an equal life. But if you've got an equal living and you've got equality, true equality, I think that's the key to it. I think that's how we all get along better and get a better understanding of one another.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And where do you think we are currently in this country at the moment on that scale?
I think we've raised the discussion, at least. I think there's a long way to go, as there generally will be, but at least people are aware now of struggles that people have gone through. So even me talking to you now, 5 years ago, I'd never ever think I'd be talking to you on a platform like this in regards to Black Lives Mattering or Black Living Matters, or things that have happened in work. Same thing with the CSP BAME Society. 3-4 years ago, I'd never thought there'd be anything like that through the CSP, but yet here we are. So I think there has been some progression. I think we should celebrate the progression that we've made, but then push on further. I think people can get hung up on the fact that it's all bad and nothing's really changed, where there has been changes. There's a long way to go, and by no means have we made it yet, but at least now we can kind of call it out, have the conversations and say, well, look, this is what's happened, this is how it feels to this sector or section of people. This is where that type of language is no longer correct, or politically correct and otherwise, and this is where it may offend someone. Now, my point of view is, if you continue to use that type of language, and if you continue to to plough the same way that you did before, that shows you something about the individual that's doing it. It shows that they either don't care or they're stuck in the ways. And again, you can't force people to change. And it's not a dictatorship, and you shouldn't force people to change. But I think with that communication and the understanding, should people want to change, then we will, and it will improve. It'll improve. And again, that's what the leadership aspect of things comes in, where we can have these discussions and say, actually, to be honest, this is what's happened in the past, and this is where it's not right, and this is where we can improve together. And that comes from both sides. It's not a one-way. It's not a one-way thing. It's from both sides.
Mm. And that when this the person who's organising the course encourages you to get more BAME people involved, how do you feel about that?
I think there's about 10%. I think there was a 10% allocation, or a certain allocation where they said, should they want it or should they have the correct applicants, it's there for them. And I think it's a good thing, not at the expense of someone not getting on the course, but just to say, actually, there is a place for you at the table, at least, to say there's an opportunity for you. So that's why I kind of endorsed it, because out of, how many won there? Maybe out of, I think it was 30 applicants at the time, or 30 people on the course, and there's only 2 kind of ethnic minorities on the course at the time.
Mm. When you said before that 5 years ago you couldn't have foreseen that we'd be having this chat or you'd be on a leadership course, do you think that's down to like race, or is that just down to you as a person that you just couldn't see it yourself?
Probably a bit of both. It could be my ignorance and my lack of use of technology, to be honest. I'm not very good with IT, so maybe a bit of that, and maybe a bit because of what's happened this year with the whole Zoom meeting and having to get used to it. But then also the thought process of no one actually really caring to listen or thinking to listen. I think with the whole George Floyd situation in America, there was plenty of killings before that. There's plenty of videos before that. There was plenty of innocent people being murdered on camera before that situation. But I think with what happened with him, there was less football on television. I think the Tiger King had been out and everyone had got used to watching that, and that had kind of passed through. Ozarks had pretty much been done to death. And I think people were more focused on what was happening within the world itself. So I think at that particular incident at that time, I think people's focuses were more attuned. And then when you could see that video for 9 minutes, should you have watched it and think, actually, that's a human being in that position, regardless of his race, his creed, his culture, whatever it is, that's a human being that we're seeing on screen. And it's not a film, begging for their life and ultimately losing it. So I think this year in particular there's been a massive switch because of that, and that's given me the confidence to come and speak to you today about situations that I've been in the past and my story.
Yeah, like a perfect storm of the lockdown and
Yeah. Well, 2020, to be honest, it's been difficult for a lot of people, and it's been difficult for me as well. But at the same time, it's given us a chance to reflect. We've kind of been told, stay in your house, don't go to the pub, don't socialise with people that you would have done. Like I said, there was less sports on the television for a while, so it's given people time to actually maybe look at themselves a little bit and think about where they are in their lives and reflect. And hopefully coming out, God willing, the next side in 2021, it'll be for the better, where people have actually reflected and thought, actually, what do I want from life? What does my life really mean to me? What's it all about?
Yeah, no, it's a big question, but I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely been one that we've all asked ourselves at some point this year. I know that you've certainly had a few extra things thrown into the pot this year. You've had some health issues. Can you say more about that?
You could say that. Well, I started the FCP course at UCLan last September. Brilliant course, really enjoyed it. And again, that's basically showing you how to work in primary care. And actually being in a GP practice and how to ask the right questions, check for your red flags in primary care. So on the course, we have a GP mentor that you spend, I think it's about 80 hours with in total. And the suggestion was go and speak to your own GP and see how they assess you and see if that relates to how your mentor assesses you, and see how different GPs work. So I've always had a low heart rate. Resting is it was between 36 and 42. So I've been on all the resource training courses, spoke to some of the consultants that I work with actually in work. We work with nurses as well, and they've said, well, maybe you should get it checked, but you're fit and healthy, check my blood pressure, what's bang on. Never really felt dizzy or short of breath or tired in the gym. Sweated more than my mates, and then when you're kind of doing a superset, I'd fatigue a lot more quickly, but I just put that down to being less fit, not doing as much football as them and all the rest of it. So the suggestion was go and speak to your GP and see how they assess you. So just in passing, I mentioned to my GP, by the way, doc, my heart rate's still low. He asked the same questions: how's your blood pressure been? It's been fine. Do you feel dizzy? Short of breath? Not really. Generally feel healthy and fit. And he said, well, in 2016, you mentioned this to me as well. He went, did you not have an ECG? And I said, well, I never got the appointment. So no, I just thought that nothing came of it. So we said, well, let's do an ECG now, because it's like, what, 4 years on. So they sent me to Trafford General, and then they did the ECG, and the nurse was like, what's going on here? And I was like, well, what's wrong? She was like, well, your ECG's all over the show. This can't be right. So I need to show this to my manager. So she showed it to the manager, and the manager said, oh, you put the leads on incorrectly. He's walked in, he's fine. He's a fit, strapping lad, they said. She said, you must have put the leads on the wrong way. And the nurse said, no, I've done this job for the last 20 years. I've got a routine that I put the 12 leads on. Put it on again. And she's like, no, this isn't right. So she took the readout to one of the lead nurses. He was on his lunch at the time. And he looked at it, and he's got his ruler out, and he's gone, you'll need to do something with this. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, this isn't right. Your heart's not performing as it should. He said, you've got a massive flutter, and it's just not doing what it's supposed to do. So I was like, okay. He said, you'll have to have something done. And he kept on saying it. So I was like, right, whatever. So that was on the Thursday. By the Monday, I had an appointment with a cardiologist at Altrincham General, and an echocardiogram back at Trafford General. So I was like, what's going on here? So the cardiologist said, right, you're going to probably need to have a cardio version. And that's where they literally reset your heart to get rid of a flutter and get the heart performing as it should. And you'll have to go on medication. So like with my patients, you hear them coming in, oh, I'm rattling, I've got so many medications, and I'm on this and on that. And I'm like, I don't really want to be on any medications, because what's it all for? And the cardiologist said, no, you need it to protect your heart. You're 30, I was 37 at the time. He said, you're 37, and as you get older, it can have a negative effect on you. So he put me on some blood pressure tablets, some beta blockers, believe it or not, even though my heart rate was slow, and on some blood thinners. So I went to the echocardiogram, and the sonographer was checking the heart, digging around. My wife was with me at the time. And I said, well, how does it look? And he's like, well, I can't really say much. You're a cardiologist, I'll have to tell you. So I was like, no, let me know about this. He said, I can't really say much. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I went, okay, that's fine. What I'm going to do is, straight after this appointment, I'm going to go to the gym, and I've not been for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to absolutely hit it as hard as I can. And he kind of said, don't go to the gym. He's like, don't do that. Just wait till you speak to your cardiologist, and then go from there. So ultimately, they found out I had a flutter that needed the cardio version to reset it. Back at Trafford General again in January, they did the cardio version, and they knock you out for it for about 10 minutes, put the paddles on, reset. And then I woke back up, and like I had all the nurses and the doctors around the bed. So I was like, oh, what's gone on? Is it better? And they said, well, we had to shock you twice to get rid of the flutter, and we've got rid of the flutter, but it's shown that you've got a complete heart block. So I was like, what? And it's like, you've got a complete heart block. None of your chambers are talking to one another. And the result of your echocardiogram showed that you've got an ejection factor. That's how much blood's pumped out of the heart. They said that yours is at 35%, and you want a minimum of 50%. So 50% of the blood leaving the chambers goes around the body. So like yours is at 35%. So we need to do something. So the kids were at school. They just thought it was meant to be like a day case. So I was meant to have it done and get back by the time that they'd finished. But after that, the nurses wouldn't let me off the bed. I had to use like a cup to pee in and all the rest of it. A bottle, sorry. And they're like, no, you can't get off the bed. I'm like, well, I've walked in fine. I feel exactly the same as I've always felt. I feel in myself fine. Like, no, you're in complete heart block. It's not good. So the long and short of it was, went to the MRI, the cardiac centre there. The doctors and the nurses, we hear it all the time in clinic. Thank you so much. You've been so good. You've explained lots to me. The NHS is fantastic. You hear it all the time. Clap for the NHS, and it's true. But when you're on the receiving end of it, you see how professional those professionals are. So absolutely amazing. The surgeon woke me up the next morning, shook me awake and said, right, Mr. Chapman, you know what's happening, don't you? So I was like, well, people are telling me I've got an issue with my heart. And he's like, yeah, you're in complete heart block. You're going down for surgery for a pacemaker in 30 minutes. So I was like, wow. So literally within 24 hours, it had gone from small procedure to literally pacemaker being put in.
So, like, what was going through your mind then when he says that to you?
Well, the thing is, like I said before, I'm a man of faith. So when I do pray a lot, and then I got this, before all this happened, I've got like basically a message, I say it's from God, that says I'm going to fix, the message that I got was I'm going to fix your physical heart and I'm going to fix your spiritual heart. So I was like, gosh, that is deep, but it gave me a massive sense of reassurance. So when everyone was telling me all these different things, I kind of like had this reassurance that it's going to be all right. It's just part of your life and part of your process. And that's been 2020 pretty much in a nutshell. It's kind of like all these different things are happening, but it's all part of life and it's all part of the process that we're going through to hopefully become better. So fully put my hands in the care of the clinicians, because I listened to what they were telling me, and realised the importance of it. And what they said along the line is, you feel fine now at 38, but with these conditions, when you age a little bit more, that's when your ventricles burn out, the heart just gives up because it's working too much. And we're kind of preserving you now for later, in effect. Yeah.
So how have you been then? Like, how do you feel like now? When was that procedure done?
So yes, it's been an ongoing saga. So they did the procedure initially in January, 28th of January, and then they put, so mine was a 3-point lead. So there's 3 different leads going to the different chambers of the heart because it's completely blocked, or it was completely blocked. So one of the leads innervates the phrenic nerve, which kind of goes to your diaphragm area. So they put a box next to my bed, and the pacemaker speaks to the box to let them know how I'm doing. So they realised the power on one of the leads to the left ventricle was a little bit low. So they took me into the pacing clinic and whacked it up. And then when they whacked it up, my diaphragm started to spasm by itself. And I was like, I feel sick. So they basically said, well, that wire's not doing what it specifically needs to do. It might not be in the best position. And if it's innervating your diaphragm, we need to kind of go in and rejiggle it again. So in August of this year, they went in and pulled it up the sheath a little bit and then replanted it. So that's a lot better now. But then I was still feeling, so before I was never really short of breath, never really dizzy per se. But then after the procedure, I thought, well, I am a little bit more short of breath, I am a little bit more dizzy, put a bit of weight on, not been able to hit the gym like I did before because of COVID, but also just because I don't feel like I did before. So then the box that's upstairs spoke to them, next to the bed, spoke to them and said, no, you've gone back into atrial flutter again. So then next month they want to go in to do another procedure called catheter ablation, and that's where they put like a wire up into the vein, into the heart, and start to burn out parts of your heart where the electrical conduction's not quite right. So that's the next step, mid-December. So a nice little Christmas present for me there. But then hopefully, God willing, after that, then it's all sorted for 2021.
Yeah, and so how has that been in terms of your work then? Because everything is about for people at risk, with heart problems like COVID. How have you been able to do things then?
So you've got the BAME risk anyway, where they've said there's a link of being BAME and increased risk of dying from this COVID situation. So that's one of them. I was waiting between January and August for the second surgery. So they said, no, you're waiting for surgery. So again, you're at risk. So you had to isolate in the first as part of it, and they said, no, you're still at an increased risk. So we've got a really good integrated system in work at present, where we've been a paper-like service from the beginning. So from 2008, literally, we were on computers from then. All our assessments are done on computer. We use dictaphones. And what's happened now is I've been given the opportunity to develop our video assessment services. So kind of like how I'm talking with you now would be how I speak with a patient, and we get them to go into different positions and look at different body parts and assess that way. So it's kind of really improved my communication skills when assessing, and also makes you listen. Again, and this is from the leadership development course as well, listening, being able to listen to the information that somebody's giving you. So it's honed those skills further, where literally I either assess on the telephone at the moment or on a Teams platform video. That's worked really well, had some really good feedback from patients. A lot of them prefer it because there's no travel time, no travel expenses, reduces their carbon footprint. And for non-serious cases, you can literally discuss it, clinician to patient over the video. I think it reduces the whole white coat syndrome issue as well. A couple of big cases as well where the GP referral letter would come in and like back pain with radiculopathy and with leg symptoms. So kind of you're kind of thinking, well, is it a disc bulge or is there a major deficit? So the patient would explain it to you. We've got diagnostic services as well, so I was able to send patients for the MRI. So I'm not seeing the patient face to face. Send for an MRI scan, get the images back, and then you're able to share those images with the patients, good, bad, or indifferent. So a couple of them have had to be referred to Salford Royal because they've got major disc extrusions with major nerve root compression. And you can actually show them on the screen, look, that's a nerve root, that's a major disc bulge, that's why you can't feel your leg, and that's why I'm referring you. Here's your red flags for it all, this is what you might experience, this is when you go to A&E, and then you can share all the different information on screen. So it's been great. And then conversely for the patients where they think they've got a massive disc bulge or they do need a knee replacement, and you've got the images, you can say, no, look, you've got really good joint space. You might still have some pain, but you've got decent joint space. There's no indication for surgery. You can see that for yourself. Physiotherapy will be key to rehab your knee because you've been at home for the last 8 months during COVID. So this is why you don't need surgery, and this is why you do need physio. And it's worked to treat. It's been great.
No, that's really good. There's definitely some really positive things that have come out of it.
Yeah.
In terms of that rehab then, is that something that they do on their own, or are they brought in for classes, or how is that communicated?
Yeah, so a combination of the two. So again, we've trained, one of my colleagues works for Babylon, so they've been doing these kind of video assessments for the longest time, and she's really used to doing that rehab on screen and assessing on screen. So she's in the physiotherapy department. So I work as an advanced practitioner, but she does the physiotherapy rehab. So she's trained some of her other colleagues, and they are now doing that rehab on screen, either with YouTube videos, specific videos that the team makes, or sending them to the CSP website for specific links. So yeah, it has worked quite well.
No, that's definitely good. So wrapping up, what would your advice be for any people wanting to get into physio?
Right, so what I would say is ask yourself, what do you really want to do? What do you want to be? Why do you want to be it? And where do you see yourself? So have a bit of a plan, because I never had a plan. Literally, I wanted to be a vet. So you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do this thing? What does success look like for me? Because when I was a physio, you'd see people like Dave, people like Paul, and they'd be like, I want to be like them. I'm like, look, this looks fantastic. But that could be at the expense of a different aspect of your life. And I'm very much a family man. I've got a wife and 4 children, so they're my priority. So going into physiotherapy and going into different roles, it has to be that work-life balance. And it's got to be the balance of what's best for what's going on between your ears as well. That's another thing that does plague physiotherapists at times, is the high rate of depression. I remember when first looking at the course, they said, oh, physiotherapy has a high rate of depression. And in my head, I was like, that's never going to be me. I'm too happy and too bright for that, and enjoy life too much for that. But there are times where it can be quite lonely and quite depressing. For instance, when I was on the wards, it was a while ago now, there was a young boy, I think he was 12, and he'd gone into he drowned basically, and they brought him back. But literally there's no real response from him. It affected his brain massively. And I remember being, I think about 20 or 21, being on the wards, doing the nasal pharyngeal suctioning on this guy, thinking, what's it all about? You ask yourself, you go in one day, you'll be talking to the patient still, advising them what you're doing before you do it, and then looking for a reaction. The sats would drop while you're suctioning, and then they go back up after you'd finished, and then that would be it. That would be the only interaction you'd had with this actual person who's there, but can't converse with you. So as a clinician doing that, and the next day you'd go and do the same thing until you finish the rotation. So mentally in your head, you're kind of thinking, well, what's this all about? So being able to manage those types of feelings and your emotions and what's going on in between your ears, I think is key in physiotherapy and in whatever profession you go into. And the example I had again from another patient, I can't hide my emotions much on my face. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I'm very animated. So one of the patients on the ward, on the orthopedic rotation, she said, you have to enjoy your work. And I said, right, yeah, I do enjoy it. She went, no, you've got to enjoy it. You have to enjoy what you do. I said, right, I hear what you say. And she said it again. She's like staring at me. I think she's in her 80s. It was a bit weird. And I was like, okay. Then she said, I'm in here for my hip hop, for my hip operation. And she said, I know when I injured this hip, it was when I was dancing on the cruise ships and we were dancing in all different positions. She went, I know I've knackered my hip from that. She went, I can't dance anymore, but I've got the memories of the time I had enjoying that dancing. And she went, that's what you need to have in your profession and in your career. You have to be able to make and have good memories, and so that when you're older and you can't do what you used to do, it's not all seem like a waste. So again, my advice is, you want to do physio, whatever you want to do, be it physio, whatever it is, remember the world's your oyster, so to speak, and to enjoy what you do. It's like with breaking bad news to patients. It's not sometimes it's not good news, but you can do it in a way whereby it doesn't sound as bad as it really is, and there's always a positive at the end of it all. And that's the same thing with treating the patients. People come to see you over and over again because they're in pain or they're injured or they're scared or they're anxious, and then a lot of their emotions, you take them on board. So you have to find a way of either coping with that and then making it positive, making it good ultimately for you and for them. Otherwise, you go downhill as well.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a believer in positivity and communicating that with whoever you're dealing with.
Yeah.
No, great, Julian. I really appreciate your time on that, giving us some good insights into things. So yeah, definitely very good luck with your next procedure.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
As well. Hopefully we can get you back on next year when you're all back in the gym and.
Yeah, and looking fit instead of all this flab.
That's good, but no, thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers. Thank you, Andy. Much appreciated. Have a good Christmas.
You too. Cheers.
I'd see you now.